In this lesson, I will show you all the ways you can create arcs in SketchUp. In the open file, 4 different arcs have been created. In the first example, I created an arc by defining its radius and angle. When you want to create arcs by defining the center, radius, and angle, you should activate the Arc tool. You can activate the Arc tool from the Draw menu if you hover the cursor over arcs and select the Arc option. Alternatively, you can click on the arc icon that you will find in the toolbar on the left. This time, I will click on the arc icon to activate the tool. Notice that as soon as I move the cursor in the drawing area, a protractor appears. In addition, the message, "Select Center Point," has appeared in the status bar, prompting me to specify the center of the arc. But before I proceed to define the center, I should mention that, just like when we create circles, we can change the number of the arc's sides. At this point, I should remind you that SketchUp doesn't draw arcs or circles. It just creates segments to create an arc or a circle, which means the more you increase the value in the sides field, the smoother the circle or arc will appear. I will not change the default value of this field, which is 12, and I will click to define the center of the arc. After I specified the center of the arc, the message, "Select First Arc Point or Enter Radius," appears. I will enter the value of the radius, so I will type 10 and press Enter. Then, the message, "Select Second Arc Point or Enter Angle," appears. This means that I can define the second point of the arc or enter the angle. In this example, I will enter the angle, so I will move the cursor upwards to set the direction, type the number 60, and press Enter. Notice that the arc is created. In the next example, I will create an arc where the distance between its starting and ending points is 12 meters and the upper quadrant of the circle is at a distance of 8 meters from the imaginary line connecting the starting and ending points. To create this arc, I will use the 2-point arc command. You can activate the 2-point arc tool from the Draw menu if you hover the cursor over Arcs and select the 2-point arc option. Or you can simply click on the 2-point arc icon that you will find in the toolbar on the left. This time, I will click on the 2-point arc icon to activate the tool. Automatically, the message, "Select Start Point," appears in the status bar. I will click on a random point to define it. Next, the message, "Select End Point or Enter Value," appears, meaning that you should either click to define the endpoint or enter a distance value. I will move the cursor horizontally, type the number 12, and then press Enter. Notice that as I move the cursor vertically, the arc changes accordingly, and when the distance between the upper quadrant of the circle and the imaginary line connecting the starting and ending points becomes 6, the message, "Half Circle," appears. This means that right now the arc is a half circle and the arc's radius is 6. However, this is not what I want, so I will type the number 8 and press Enter. As soon as I pressed Enter, the arc was created, and it is exactly what I wanted. In the following example, I will create an arc by defining its center, starting, and ending points, but this time a surface will be automatically created. To create this arc, I have to activate the Pi tool. You can activate the Pi tool from the Draw menu if you hover the cursor over Arcs and select the Pi option. Otherwise, you can click on the Pi icon from the toolbar on the left. I will click on the icon to activate it. Now I will click to define the center of the arc, then type the number 10 and press Enter to define its radius. Finally, I will type the number 90 and press Enter to define its angle. Notice that a surface with the shape of an arc is automatically created. In other words, this tool is the same as the Arc tool, except that it automatically creates a surface according to the curve of the arc. The last arc tool is the 3-point arc, which creates an arc by defining 3 points. You can activate the 3-point arc tool from the Draw menu if you hover the cursor over Arcs and select the 3-point arc option. Again, you can activate the tool if you simply click on the 3-point arc icon from the toolbar on the left. Now, I will activate the tool to create an arc that intersects with the 3 circles that I have created in the drawing area. So, I will click on the first circle, then on the second circle, and finally on the third circle. Notice that the arc I created intersects with all three circles. Before we finish the lesson, I will show a way in which you can create filleted corners. I will activate the rectangle tool, and I will draw a random rectangle in the drawing area. Then, I will activate the 2-point arc tool again, and I will define the first point at a random point on the upper side of the rectangle. Now, I will move to the left side, and once the tangent to edge prompt appears, I will double-click. Notice that a fillet was created in that corner.